This is a review for the Lego Batman movie, the making of the movie. I always thought it was such a shame that there was no sort of art or making of book for the first Lego movie, so it was really great that they released one for the Batman movie, and I really enjoyed this book. I think it's very, very fun in the same way that the movie is, and in that sense is a great companion to the movie. However, with this review I am going to be quite critical, simply because all of the other reviews I've read and seen have been overwhelmingly positive. And so I do just sort of want to temper that a little bit, just so that you'll have a more realistic understanding of what to expect from this book. And I think just definitely make sure you're paying close attention to the actual images in the flip through in this one, because it actually is a little different to your typical animation book. It's published by DK and very much uses the same sort of format they use for sort of all their books for the last over 20 years. But just off the top of my head, I really can't recall DK publishing any sort of strictly an art and making of book before. So just the sort of format, the layout, the choice of pictures, the style of writing, everything it's quite an interesting approach. It's not necessarily better or worse, just different. But if nothing else, I certainly did enjoy the sort of novelty of having something that kind of feels a bit different and fresh for an animation art book. And I shouldn't call it an art book, because this gets into sort of my major gripe with the book, and that is the text, or lack thereof, and the title of the book. It's called The Making of the Movie, and I think that has the potential to mislead some people. In my mind, if a book is called The Making of, that to me says it's going to be a documentation of the making of the movie. It's going to be a lot more text heavy, whereas something called The Art of is obviously going to be focused more on just visuals, concept art, and all that sort of stuff. And so if you're happy to accept those definitions, to call this a making of book is simply not true. The book actually opens really strong and seeming like it's going to live up to this title. It has a really great first 10 pages that breaks down the animation process, both in general and also using sort of specific examples from the Batman movie. But really, that's it. After those first 10 pages, the rest of the text is basically just one or two sentence captions for each image, which it is actually good to see that all of the images are given sort of semi-detailed captions. But unlike most making of books, there's actually no body text supporting these images. There's really only just the captions. And on top of that, the vast majority of them are just superficial or stating the obvious. And now, of course, some of the information in these captions is really great and gives sort of, it's usually just sort of like facts or statistics or telling you about like the various inspirations behind what you're looking at. And that's good. And if this strictly were an art book, you could probably get away with doing that. But for a book called The Making of, and in the foreword, this book is referred to as being a deep dive into the animation development process, to have the book essentially be, maybe one interesting fact per page really isn't enough. There's really no documenting the actual process for the making of this movie, which I think is a real shame, because having a movie made completely out of Lego, I would think, offers some really great stories and development and insight that would be quite different to other animated movies. So I think ultimately, if I had been in charge of the title of this book, I would have preferred The Art and Making of the Movie, to perhaps help signify that it is much more visual than text heavy. But ultimately I would have preferred a completely different title altogether, something like The Movie Companion or something like that. And you might say, well, maybe it's not as text heavy because it is a children's book, which it is. It's all ages, however you want to call it. Like 99.9% of the Lego Group's products, it is aimed at children or all ages, which is absolutely as it should be. But I honestly suspect that a non-fiction book like this, a look behind the scenes of a movie, will actually have a higher adult readership. And I mean, I'm sure kids will like this book, but just in as much as they would like looking through any book that's about Batman or Lego. Because just thinking back to what I would have wanted as a Lego and movie-obsessed 10-year-old, if I was given the choice between this book and one of the many other books they released for this movie, like the character encyclopedias, the visual guides, things that focus more on the fiction, I definitely would have gone for those and enjoyed those more than this. And so for the teen teen and adult readership. There's really just not enough to sort of sink your teeth into information-wise in this book. I suppose in like the most sort of idealized Norman Rockwell vision for how this book would be used, it would be enjoyed by an adult and a kid together, or, you know, a family. You watch the movie, and then if you've got a kid or kids who are interested in the animation process, and then you could sit down together and go through this book, and you would sort of be able to be there to sort of explain more things, like look at the sketches and see how they were translated to the final renders and explain what storyboards are. And if you think that's a scenario that is applicable to your life, then definitely go for it, and you'll get more out of this book than anyone. But honestly, for, you know, the vast majority of the people who are reading this book, I don't think that's the case. And so then, just to briefly touch on the visuals, another way this book really differs from traditional animation books is, I think that in terms of artistic quality, this book, the concept art in this book really can't live up to the high standard you'll see in Disney, Pixar, and DreamWorks books. And besides that, there's really not a whole bunch of what you might think of as traditional sort of concept art you'd see in these sort of books. However, the book really does do a good job of playing to its sort of the advantages that DK books are known for by having a really great variety of high quality images. It's got sketches and storyboards and, you know, traditional concept art and like a couple of great behind the scenes photos, and all presented in a way that is sort of very succinct with the movie. Another thing the visuals are not doing an excellent job of in this book is showing a lot of alternate designs for vehicles, locations, characters, which is something sorely lacking from so many art books. But unfortunately, there's of course not really any text going into detail about why certain directions were followed and others abandoned. But then, despite having very high quality photos, there is the sort of usual DK issue of having either some images way too big and others way too small. But on the whole, the images are going to be the main draw for this book, and they are really fun. Even if it is just a full page or a full spread of minifigure costume designs for Batman or the Joker or Harley Quinn, as someone who is just such a huge fan of Batman and Lego, I think is definitely responsible for why I really did enjoy this book, despite a few of its shortcomings.